There was a time not too long ago when a man's desire had direction. It pointed somewhere. It may have been chaotic, imperfect, misfiring, but it had movement. That movement was part of a sacred arc, something shaped slowly through challenge, tension, struggle, and delay. But now, something has changed. Something quiet. Something sinister. Not loud enough to provoke alarm, but potent enough to weaken an entire generation from the inside out. And it begins with a screen. It begins with an image. It begins with a shortcut. The male's soul, wired over millennia for danger, conquest, sacrifice, and pursuit, has been gradually sedated by instant gratification in digital form. And porn, more than any other tool, has become the silent thief, not of pleasure, but of purpose. Philip Zimbardo, once the architect of the infamous Stanford prison experiment, has since turned his attention to this very collapse. He's watched, over decades, as men have retreated into artificial worlds, not just because they want to, but because they no longer believe the real one offers them anything they can win. Porn is not simply about sex. It is not just lust. It is imitation intimacy. It is a performance that teaches the nervous system to crave what cannot be touched, to respond to pixels like they're people, to expect pleasure without vulnerability. And what is stolen in this transaction is not just dopamine, it is the masculine soul's compass. Because no matter how vivid the scene, how intense the fantasy, a man knows on some level that what he is receiving is counterfeit. And the more he consumes, the less he believes in what is real.
Zimbardo calls it the demise of guys. And it's not just about addiction, it's about disconnection, emotional dislocation. Porn trains the mind to receive without giving, to take without risking. Over time, it doesn't just shape what you desire, it rewires what you expect from yourself. Why face rejection when pleasure is a click away? Why wrestle with awkwardness or self-doubt or the sacred slowness of human connection when stimulation is immediate, unlimited, and requires nothing from you but your solitude? And that is where the soul begins to leak, not in one dramatic collapse, but in subtle retreats. The man who once would have spoken up hesitates. The one who might have fought for love scrolls instead. The one who could have carved a legacy with his bare hands disappears into the algorithm. This is not a moral lecture. This is a spiritual autopsy. Because when we talk about porn, we're not just talking about sex. We're talking about an erosion of initiation, the death of becoming. The masculine spirit is forged in friction, against fear, against resistance, against rejection. But porn removes all friction, all tension, all cost. It gives the illusion of arrival without the journey. And what remains is a man who feels hollow, not because he doesn't feel anything, but because he feels everything too easily, too quickly, too alone. Pleasure without connection becomes poison, and poison consumed daily becomes identity.
Zimbardo noticed something alarming in his studies. Men are not just failing to connect romantically, they're pulling back from the world entirely. Academically, socially, professionally, they are falling behind in every metric of forward momentum. And while porn is not the only reason, it is a portal, a signal, a mirror reflecting a deeper wound. Because it's not the naked body that seduces, it's the escape. The pause from inadequacy, the fantasy of being desired without the work of being known. That's what hijacks the soul, the bypassing of the heroic journey. And it gets worse, because the more a man engages with this kind of dissociation, the less resilient he becomes in the face of real relationships. He brings his trained expectations of silence, submission, perfection into the realm of living women. He resents their complexity. He recoils at their emotions. He sees emotional availability not as a dance, but a demand, something he was never taught to navigate. Porn doesn't teach patience. It teaches immediacy. It doesn't cultivate attunement. It cultivates appetite. And so a generation raised on porn finds itself unable to look a woman in the eye without flinching because eye contact requires presence. And porn has trained them to be anywhere but here. Over time, a man starts to believe he is unworthy of real connection. He begins to see himself as broken, perverse, shameful, not because he desires, but because his desire has no direction. And instead of seeking help, he withdraws further. Instead of facing the shadow, he hides inside it. And this, more than anything, is how porn hijacks the soul, not with force, but with forgetfulness. It convinces the man to forget who he is, to forget that desire is holy when it serves love, that lust is powerful when it is anchored to purpose, that his body is not a machine, but a vessel of longing, capable of courage, risk, tenderness, and fire. Porn does not steal these things from him. It tempts him to give them away, pixel by pixel, one OnlyFans subscription to another, night after night.
But here's the paradox that strangles most men before they even know what's tightening around their throat. They don't feel enslaved, not at first. They feel in control. Clicking is easy. Closing the window is easy. Subscription is cheap and private. No one has to know. No one gets hurt. No consequences. And yet, somewhere deeper than thought, the soul keeps the score. Because while the man may forget what he's seen, his nervous system does not. While he may move on with his day, some part of him, subtle, vital, instinctual, has shifted. And slowly, without fireworks or blood, his ability to bond, to fight, to dream, dulls. He becomes desensitized not just to pleasure, but to awe, to commitment, to beauty that doesn't come in curated poses or filtered desire. Philip Zimbardo speaks not just of addiction, but of arrested development, of what happens when a generation of men grows up on simulation instead of initiation. And make no mistake, every culture that survived beyond a generation understood this truth. If you do not initiate your young men, they will burn the village down to feel something. Or worse, they will disappear into glowing caves, lit by blue light and filled with dopamine hits that cost them their instincts. You see, porn gives men a crown without a kingdom. It tells them they are kings while locking them inside their rooms. And over time, they begin to believe that the room is enough. But it isn't. And their bodies know it. Their shame knows it. That haunting numbness, that low-grade frustration, that echoing sense that something is missing. It is the voice of the soul, starving. And what the soul hungers for is not merely sexual release. It's reverence. Not just a naked body, but a sacred witness. Someone to be seen by, chosen by, fought for. And these things cannot be clicked into existence. They are earned through work, through weighing, through the excruciating, beautiful difficulty of real human connection. And here, most men falter, not because they are cowards, but because they were never taught how. They were taught technique, not presence. They were taught excess, not pursuit. They were taught to aim for orgasms, not for meeting. No one told them that real intimacy will wreck them before it remakes them, that it will shatter illusions, force growth, demand vulnerability. And so they return to the screen, not because they prefer it, but because it never asks them to bleed. But in avoiding the blood, they avoid the bond. They miss the exact thing their soul was built for, becoming through devotion. Porn thrives on the absence of becoming. It sells you the idea that you're already enough, already there, already victorious, without having fought, waited, sacrificed, or failed. And because the soul knows this is false, it revolts. Quietly, in small ways, the motivation fades, the voice lowers, the eyes shift, the shoulders slump. The man may still function, but he no longer feels forged. Because porn keeps men from the forge. It keeps them from the wilderness, the dark night, the fire where character is built, where love becomes covenant and not transaction. And let's be clear, this is not about condemning desire. It's about dignifying it, reclaiming it, because male desire, when untwisted, when aimed towards something higher, is not dangerous. It's divine. It's the engine of creation, protection, civilization. But untrained,
It collapses into compulsion, into hiding, into bitterness toward the very women it once longed to adore. And Zimbardo warns of this trend, the slide from erotic wonder into isolated resentment. He calls it the disembodied male, the man who no longer feels anchored in the world, no longer believes he has a part to play. But there is a part, and it begins by reclaiming what was given away, slowly, brutally, tenderly, to face the shame not with disgust but with honesty, to meet the hunger not with denial but with reverence, to realize that the addiction is not the root, it's the symptom. The root is loss. The root is exile from the deeper masculine path. And when a man stops numbing long enough to feel that wound, to grieve it without collapsing, something ancient stirs. He remembers the hunt, the vow, the fire, the kind of masculinity that doesn't consume but creates, doesn't cling but commits, doesn't retreat into fantasy but walks straight into the storm of becoming.
But to walk into that storm, to reclaim what's been dulled, hijacked, broken, requires something that no screen can ever offer: resistance. Not moral posturing, not performative discipline, but the kind of resistance forged in silence, over time, in the trenches of the everyday. When the urge rises, when the algorithm whispers, when your nervous system screams for comfort, do you remember who you were before the screen trained you? Before the hours vanished, before the faces blurred, before the weight of your own desire became unbearable? Zimbardo didn't just warn about porn in the biological sense, he warned about the social collapse it reflects. The slow erosion of purpose, of shared rights, of meaning handed down from man to man, mentor to student, father to son. When those rituals die, the vacuum gets filled not with courage, but with consumption. And men raised by pixels and endless novelty become allergic to the very discomfort that would make them men. They never hear the older voice say, "This will hurt, but it is yours to bear." They only hear the click, the escape, the digital substitute that asks for nothing and devours everything. This is why the most dangerous thing porn steals isn't just your time, your relationships, or your dopamine. It steals your becoming. It hijacks the heroic arc, because to grow into a man is not simply to stop watching porn, it's to become so filled with a deeper mission, a sacred burden, that there's no room left for it. It's to burn the blueprint of passive consumption and carve a new one built not on shame, but on honor. You stop seeking mere pleasure and start demanding meaning. You trade novelty for presence, stimulation for stability, urgency for legacy. And that shift, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in the smallest moment. When you close the tab and sit in the ache. When you let your hands tremble and don't reach for the usual fix. When you stare back at the shame and don't flinch. This is the beginning of soul recovery, of letting pain refine you instead of define you, of letting hunger drive you towards something worthy, something built in time and tested by fire. Because here's the truth most men don't hear enough. You were not meant to be numb. You were not meant to settle. You were not meant to live in shadows, chasing ghosts of desire that vanished by morning. You were meant to rise, to protect something, to build something, to offer something so solid, so anchored, so utterly present, that when a woman sees you, she doesn't just see a man, she sees a place she could finally rest, not because you're perfect, not because you've conquered every urge, but because you've chosen the path of becoming, again and again, even when it breaks you. That is the antidote to porn, not fear, not guilt, but purpose, vision, brotherhood. The fierce remembering of what it feels like to walk with your eyes up, your spine straight, your soul intact. Because the world doesn't need more men who hide. It needs men who return. Men who've gone into the dark, felt the fracture, and still come back with open hands.
Men who can hold the weight, not just of their own desire, but of another person's trust. You were never made to click through your life. You were made to carry something real. And the moment you begin to carry it, not perfectly, not without stumbling, but earnestly, you begin to recover your soul. One hard-won day at a time, one choice at a time, until one day you don't just resist the screen, you forget what it ever offered. Because you have something better now. A mission, a vow, a self no longer split in two. And that, Zimbardo would say, is how the modern man unplugs, not just from porn, but from everything that kept him small. The world doesn't need more strong men. It needs whole ones. And wholeness is built, not found, chosen, not downloaded. So start choosing. And if you feel the hunger rise again, don't shame it. Bless it. Because it's proof that your soul is still alive.